do you credit most influential in your life? And give me more than one, personal or professional.
I'll give you two at this point, and part of it's for the way you phrase that, Kirt, and just sort of our conversation thus far. A next door neighbor of mine, he was a retired colonel from the Army, and he was a West Pointer, and he was sort of a third grandparent, he and his wife, or a pair of grandparents to us, and so just by virtue of him, and I recall his giving me all sorts of catalogs of West Point when I was a kid growing up, and you know, I thought it was neat to read through the material, but I don't really believe it sunk in and launched a career perspective for me. But the one, I'd say, and this other person that I'm starting to refer to, I didn't know him nearly as well as the next door neighbor, but a gentleman by the name of Story Musgrave. I don't know, I wouldn't expect you to have ever heard of him. He actually was a MD. He was a mission specialist with NASA. When I was a student at UK, he at the time had been a physician at the hospital at UK, and just I remember reading about him as I was a student there, that when I first got started at UK, my aspiration was to go to med school, so I was taking the classes to do so. I even did volunteer work in a hospital and worked for a EMS service. And as I read about this guy, because of his background, so mission specialist with NASA, a medical doctor. The guy had like about 6 or 7 different degrees. He was a licensed pilot. He was a parachutist with like about 800 plus jumps.
Did he break any bones? Wow.
You know, he pushed himself, obviously, and just for somebody like that, you know, as I mentioned a little bit ago, kind of being that Renaissance man or the person of multiple abilities is, to my perspective, Kirt, kind of aspirational. And I thought, man, that's cool as heck. And so at that point, I thought, well, maybe I could strive to go to med school and then get into the mission specialist program at NASA. And so over the course of the next year, I thought about that more and more so, and it led me to think, well, I'm not as bright as this guy, and this guy is just so professional and so developed across multiple levels to be able to compete with something like that. Well, maybe I could use my military background, because I'd already been into the military prior to college for a few years, and I thought, you know what, I could become a Army Ranger. That would be unique, and that would be a plus on my NASA application.
Cool.
And so the more I started to think about this, that this does have a point. I'm not just meandering.
That's fine.
It caused me to think more so about going back into the military, becoming an Army Ranger, pursuing that. And this may seem kind of trite, Kirt, but I just came to realize that for me personally, actually to become an Army Ranger, as trite as it might seem to some folks, but that was a stronger aspiration than going to med school. So it caused me to, over the course of a year, completely consider a different option and head in another direction. And obviously that's what I stuck with, and it's worked out fairly well.